Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sara Jane, your hostess, and I am delighted this evening, because it's evening for me, to be joined by Dr. Diane Mueller. Diane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, to supporting this community. So it's really great to be here.
Thank you so much. Our topic for this evening is Love and Libido Jumpstart Program. And so let me share a little bit about Dr. Diane before we start, and then we will get into the bulk of the program. Dr. Diane Mueller, ND, DAOM, is a seasoned sexual wellness authority, blending a strong educational foundation with a rich clinical and teaching experience. With a dual doctorate in naturopathic medicine and acupuncture and Oriental medicine, Diane has illuminated the discourse on sexual health through her practice, My Libido Doc. Her personal journey through sexual health challenges has equipped her with a unique empathetic, it is right, I was right, lens, enriching her holistic approach to patient care. Diane extends her expertise through the Libido Lounge podcast, her online training institute, and by training medical professionals worldwide in functional medicine. Her proactive community engagements include co-hosting sexual health events and participating in numerous summits, reflect her commitment to fostering a well-informed sexual wellness dialogue. At the heart of her practice lies the belief that a healthy libido is a cornerstone to holistic wellness, driving a practice that has orchestrated transformative health journeys for her clients. Dr. Diane, thank you so very much for joining us here on the program. Please share a little of your story and why this is such a passion and so important to you.
Yeah, my story actually, thank you so much. My story actually started out pretty traumatically, really. So my interest in libido and sexual wellness actually really emerged after a sexual assault. And that was, as traumatic as anybody can imagine. And one of the things, though, that was happening to me when I was going through my recovery process with that, I worked with amazing healers and therapists, and I was 19 years old when this happened. And one of the things I was noticing was once I had felt that I had psychologically, recovered from that and healed from that, and I was doing a lot of art therapy, actually, was one of the most amazing modalities for me to heal. And one of the things I actually discovered with that was it was almost like I was like numb. Part of my body was numb. And once I started getting into healthy relationships, like I remember my first really healthy relationship after that, this beautiful, wonderful, kind soul. We were together for 2 years. And basically what I was experiencing is like intimately, I would find myself either like almost disassociating with sex and also experiencing pain and vaginal numbness. And so that really, like, I felt like I wasn't having any more charge around the assault, but I was still experiencing clearly like my body holding memory. And, and unfortunately, this sort of story happens to way too many women. But regardless of if that's like somebody's story or not, I think the biggest take home point with this is like, we often have these like valleys, these like dark places, these dark nights of the soul, as they're sometimes called, where we go into these really intense places. And when we emerge, oftentimes, we have insights. And so some of the insight I really got from that was more of a curiosity around like, okay, well, how does the body hold memory? How do we actually like interrelate from a standpoint of intimacy? Because I was in a safe space. I was with a loving partner, all these different things. And yet I felt this level of like disconnect. And it really got me interested in the connection between, say, the heart and our feminine anatomy, between the heart and sexuality. And that began, almost 2 decades of, of reading, of studying, of learning. I have a very different other practice on the side. I feel like the two different types of people I tend to treat are people that have walked similar journeys as I have, because that's really usually where I initially start my research, is like, okay, well, how do I help heal this thing? And so that started, studying with sex coaches, studying with relationship coaches, and these sorts of things, but also understanding, like with Chinese medicine, one of the things that really came out for me in my healing was the understanding of just even the energetics. Like we have this amazing channel, this amazing energetic flow, this connection actually between our heart and our womb. And we talk about that in Chinese medicine, that we have this depth of connection between our heart and our womb space. So that really, like learning some of that, is that those kind of things, even in school, really also created a level of curiosity around, like, what does this mean? What does this mean for myself? What does this mean for my relationship? What does this mean for other human beings?
Oh, amazing. Because you talked about the trauma, and the trauma was at 19. But I'm sure you deal with people who've had trauma many, many years before, and it doesn't necessarily have to have been a sexual trauma, but it's a trauma that has left them feeling very insecure, which I am sure makes a real difference to people as well.
Yeah, there's a couple different things we can say about that. Like, one, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to intimacy, there absolutely, and there's studies on this that show that we get in this vicious cycle, right? Where when we have self-confidence and good self-esteem, that oftentimes goes into our relationships, and we can show up for partners both from a communication standpoint and an emotional intimacy standpoint, as well as from a sexual standpoint and a love standpoint. When we have that confidence, it's people tend to be more easily engaged in deeply relating to their partner. And the vicious cycle we get into there is that when we are sexually connected, when we are deeply connected, when we are emotionally connected, we actually see that actually raises self-confidence. So there's one study that shows that, okay, understanding and being able to be engaged sexually actually improves self-confidence. So that's very interesting to me, right? We get into this cycle. So then that's another part of the conversation we can have, is how to get out of the cycle. But before we go there, I want to also say that in relationship to this conversation around, say, trauma and past things, another thing that can happen is we have like the upper part of our body. Like in medicine, one of the things we talk about is as above, so below. So like the top part of our spine, for example, like our cervical spine, or the spine in our neck, if there's a problem there, the way the neurology, the way the nervous system, and the way the structure is set up, that oftentimes the top part of our neck, if we have pain there, it can actually lead to pain in the pelvic area, the bottom part of our spine. So oftentimes when we are experiencing stress or trauma or these types of things in our relationship, in our life, could be stress from work, it could be stress from a more severe trauma, it could be a motor vehicle accident, could be interrelational stress, whatever it is, very common, people clench their jaw. It's one of the reasons we have so many TMJ problems. Well, as above, so below. And so we hold this emotional tension in our jaw, but guess what is the opposite? If we were to fold the spine in half, the opposite of that is actually our pelvis and all of the muscles that make up that pelvic floor. And so it's very, very, very common that when we're holding stress in our jaw, we can often hold stress in our pelvic floor. And so that's another thing that can happen long term. And this can lead to pain with sex. It can lead to urinary incontinence, can even lead long term to like less circulation going to our pelvic floor muscles, which can lead to things like vaginal dryness. So it's like, this is another area where it's like some of those traumas or that emotional tension. We notice this in our jaw. Sometimes we talk to our doctor about it. We have headaches, we have TMJ, But because our pelvic floor muscles are more internal and we're not taught as humans how to actually feel into those muscles, our pelvic floor, so we can hold all that tension there. And it might only come out when we have urinary incontinence. We might only realize it, or we might only realize it when we're having pain with sex and we can't connect to our partner in those sorts of ways. But that can stem back, kind of like your question suggests, all the way back to those other kinds of trauma.
No, brilliant. So and our body does speak to us. It's just us being able to be aware of how to listen to it speaking to us. So, I work with energy techniques, and it's very much a matter of sort of, it is, the body does speak, but, and it's where in our body that it's communicating to us, because it can't speak to us in words. So as you've just said, I wasn't aware of the connection with the jaw, which is really hilarious, because my wake up call came via a broken jaw, broken by the dentist. But I had no idea that the jaw was actually connected to that area of your body. And so there've got to be other aspects. We're aware of, sort of neck and shoulders. Whose other stuff are you holding on to? It's not your own, sort of, and different things, the knees, the hips, the ankles, the eyes, the ears, the throat. A lot of us are aware of what those can mean. But what you're actually talking about is, we should really be thinking about and being taught about our body's connection and in the ways it can speak to us.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? I appreciate the conversation and the question here, because if I'm going to ask everybody that's listening to this right now to be aware of the muscles of your pelvis, like most of us are like, okay, well, I know where my finger is. Like, I know where my bicep is, right? I know where my neck is. But from a standpoint of like, and by being aware, I mean like, okay, can you actually, just like I can with my mind, put awareness on my finger? So I'm like hyper aware of like, oh, my index finger is moving up and down. My middle finger is moving up and down. I'm aware that my head's shaking, my left and right. The nervous system is actually connected very clearly. That signal from the nerve to those muscles, from the brain to the muscles, is really strong through the nervous system. Well, one of the things that happens is it's kind of like this, if like we don't use it, we lose it. And so one of the things that happens if I, say, hey, become aware of the muscles in your pelvis. For most people, it's like, well, how do I do that? And then we can start doing exercises, right? Like one of the exercises I learned early on for this is simply like if you're laying and you put your hands either like right outside, like right on top of your pubic bones, or you even insert, if you're a woman, you can even insert fingers intravaginally just on the sides of the vaginal walls. And when you're doing that, what you're doing, and then is you actually windshield your legs in and out. And what you're doing with that is you're actually changing the nervous system connection. You're allowing your brain to find the nervous system, through the nervous system, those muscles again. And when we actually do that, we can actually, we can start releasing any stored emotions we have there that may be ours, as you suggested, maybe somebody else's, and we're just holding on to it. We can actually, once we actually find those muscles, then that's when we can start doing things like our Kegel exercises better. We can start doing these things to actually strengthen those muscles better, because now the brain can actually find them. And when the brain can actually find them and that nervous system connection gets reset, guess what? We're doing more things with the blood and the circulation. The brain has found those muscles again. We're sending energy, we're sending blood, and that is actually connected to other things like sexual things like vaginal lubrication and enjoyment with sex, because you're getting that proper blood flow, you're getting that proper blood engorgement to the tissues, and you're getting that proper lubrication. And all that can come back to like holding something in those muscles, and the brain just literally cutting off that signal. Like another way of looking at this is like, okay, so anybody that's like played a instrument or did a sport for many years and then stopped. And it's like, okay, well, if you're playing guitar and you do that for a long time, and like at any given day when you're well seasoned, you can just pick it up and play. Like I've even, heard really accomplished musicians say that they notice a difference in how their fingers respond if they even take a day off. Right. So that's really interesting, because what's happening there is like that nervous system signal is going to those fingers in that certain way over and over and over again. The brain can find those muscles and remembers, this is how we want to move. This is how we want to behave. But if we have something where we're holding tension, we're holding trauma, and we're cutting our signal off over days, months, weeks, years, right? Then so many times it's that remembering, that brain remembering that signal, that slowly allows those muscles to come on and to become engaged again. And the use it, we lose it. Like it's way more than life. Like it is about intimacy, and it is about libido, and it is about connection, and it is about our partner, but it's also about general wellness and health. It's about how do we actually not have pain in this area? How do we actually not have all of this, this urine come out when we sneeze, when we laugh, when we cry? It's about how do we keep these muscles, just like other muscles in our body, super toned and super healthy, so that we can age in a way that's as graceful as possible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. If anybody has got any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We're here, so Dr. Diane is well, quite happy to answer them for you. So it's actually becoming really aware of our whole body, not just the physical aspects on the outside, but the physical aspects on the inside, and learning to love our body, so that we aren't shy and fearful and afraid of what other people look at, I suppose, because we can be that. It's just like lights on or lights off. Sort of. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very, very grateful in my 20s. I met a woman who said something to me that really stuck with me. It was so simple. And it was just something along, as I can't quote her verbatim anymore. It was something along the lines of, never compare yourself to a woman in a magazine because she's been airbrushed. And I think as society, it's so easy to compare ourselves to others. And it's so easy to be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to look at the magazine, or I'm going to look at the TV. And we start to develop this sense of like, this is what beauty is. This is what sexuality is. I think we see this a lot too, even in sex and intimacy, around, even if it's the porn industry, or even if it's like a quick scene in a movie, that's just an R-rated movie. It's so easy. We form a lot of our identity around intimacy and sexuality and connection to our partner based upon these types of signals in society. And it's one of the reasons I'm talking about this so openly, because I really feel like there's not like the right training on this. It's like, sex ed when I was in school was basically like pure about anatomy. And now that I know what I do, it wasn't even like a proper anatomy class. It was a very superficial anatomy class that didn't even tell us the whole picture. And then it's just whatever we catch and we pick up from society, right? And so many times it's like so easy from an intimacy standpoint to be like, okay, well, it's supposed to look like this. This is what love's supposed to look like. From a sex standpoint, it's supposed to be like naturally either like super hot and passionate, or it's supposed to fizzle out. And many times these are the options that we're given. And so many times it's like, even when it comes to like confidence in like one's own appearance, but also confidence in performance in the bedroom, it's often thought, because of society, that this whole act of intimacy is supposed to last many times 4 to 7 minutes. And everybody is supposed to be like, get the best pleasure of their lives. And if that's not it, there's got to be something wrong with us. Right. And so that's like the frame that so many of us are really given, versus like, that's actually not what intimacy looks like. For most women, it takes a minimum of 20 minutes, oftentimes 40 minutes, to even like begin to reach orgasm, because of how our bodies are function differently. But we're not told those sorts of things. So we think there's something wrong with us. And we compare ourselves oftentimes to like these airbrush people. Like even right now, I have my Zoom filter on. Like I have my Zoom filter. Like my skin is lovely, but the Zoom filter makes my skin look like a little bit even nicer than, than it is. So it's like, all these things. It's like never compare ourselves, because there's all these different ways through video, through airbrushing and these sorts of things that really allow ourselves to look and appear differently than actually how we are. And so I think really making sure we're not comparing ourselves. The other thing I have to say in this regard is I do these pole dancing classes, and these pole dancing classes are not about performance. It's all about, they're only women, and it's all about confidence is what I would say the fundamental thing of this. And essentially it's learning how to move and become more embodied, to feel more sensual and sexual in one's body, and then to be witnessed by a lot of other women that are very praising, that are very supporting. And what I've seen with this is it's amazing in these classes, because there's anybody from like, like Italy, like very, very petite women, all the way to very, very, very voluptuous women. And I've been in class with women in their 20s. I've been in class with women in their 70s. So there's such a wide variety of body types, of age, of where people are. And I'm telling you, like everybody that's listening, like I've seen people that are not like what the standard body type is, that like is standard taught in our culture and society, that are actually the most wonderfully beautiful, sexy, sensual women. And what I've really learned in these classes is what actually makes, like a sex appeal or a sensual appeal, what actually is that desire and brings that, is hugely related to how confident one person is in their body, and can they move from a place of like that depth of inner truth. And I've seen people that are like, from a magazine standpoint, this person, these people could be a supermodel, but they're not confident. And that person actually has way less of that sensual vibe, right, than that other person that is exuding confidence. So I think the more we can get away and like from this, like the body has to look this way, we have to show up this way in order to actually have self-confidence, and really realize that that is actually total, total crap. It's total garbage. And that's coming from within, and practicing that, because confidence isn't something that's learned. Confidence is something that is practiced and attained, and practice that every single day in a way around. There's a lot of different techniques I teach, but some of them can be as simple as like actually putting our hands, touching our body, touching all of our parts, and actually being like, okay, arms, okay, thighs, okay, hips, okay, butt, like, wow, you're beautiful, and really beginning to own one's and fill up one's space.
It's also really important, and it's something we aren't taught, or majority aren't taught, to love yourself. Everything comes from inside you first. If you have that love, that care, that thought, the consideration, that praise for self, as you were saying, sort of touching your arms and sort of saying, I love you, sort of, but it's that inner confidence that comes with of getting to know you, of being aware of who you are. It then doesn't matter what other people think, because you radiate that. And that can be what can draw people to you anyway. It's just so important to be about you first and foremost. You can bring so much more to others in so many different ways in life once you do that.
Yeah, and the thing I really want to emphasize here, that I mentioned, that I think is just important to emphasize again, is that the confidence is practice. It's a learned skill. Like I do a lot of, speaking on stage, and I've been on hundreds of stages at this point. And it's so often that people will be like, I'll get off and people will say like, you're so confident up there, you're a natural. Like, no, like I've gone through all of those things of like heart palpitations and anxiety and all the stress and all the fear and all those things. But confidence is like, we don't do the thing. We don't have confidence and then we do the thing. We do the thing over and over and over, and then we get confident. And so the same thing is with our bodies and our body image. And a lot of things I think that's really important too to be said here is like, when we're working on self-confidence, when we're working on sexual confidence, when we're working on better bedroom confidence, personal confidence, whatever type of confidence we're talking about, there's something to be said about actually feel it, like almost that fake it till you make it. And it's the same thing from a nervous system perspective, right? Because also in studies, I'm going to use music again because this is what the study was on piano players. So basically studies showing that people that deeply went into almost like a meditative visualization type of state, and they imagined they were actually playing the piano and their fingers were going here. And they did imagine like very specifically, like my fingers here, my fingers there, this note, then that note. So they knew their notes, but they never like played the song with the notes together. And they're like moving from note to note. And they're not just like imagining it though, from like, okay, I do a B and then I do a C sharp. And, they're not actually just like thinking about their notes. They're actually feeling like it's imagining so much, like they're actually feeling like their body is doing the movement. And what this particular study showed was that person that, or that group of people that actually did the visualization performed just as well as the people that physically practiced the song. And so what that's telling us, and what I learned from studies like that, is when we're thinking about things like, okay, well, how do I get more confidence in my body? How do I bring this into my life? Part of how we do that is actually through not just like telling ourselves and saying, okay, I'm confident, I'm beautiful, and touching ourselves. Like all those things are a start, but then we want to take it a layer deeper and like actually begin to feel like literally pretend, like, what would it feel like? What would my cells feel like if I just had this absolute abundance of confidence? What would my cells feel like? What would it feel like to just really believe that I was like the hottest thing under the sun? How would that actually make me show up? And what would it actually feel like to show up in my relationships that way? So the more we can actually make it alive and real, just like with the piano study, the more the nervous system is creating that change. And the more the nervous system creates that change, the more that change actually becomes real. So we want to do like the mantras and those, memorable things. But we also want to like feel that change in the depths of our soul and our being.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about the feeling, isn't it? It's absolutely about the feeling, and it's getting out of the trauma feelings of the unworthiness and whatever, and getting into those feelings of, yes, I am an amazing being. And we are all amazing beings. We're all special in our own unique way. And it's building that confidence, back to that word again, in ourselves, trusting in ourselves, believing in ourselves. Because without that, we struggle. And yeah, I've been there, and I'm very content in my life the way it is at the moment. How it doesn't matter how that is, but if you are happy and you're content, but it's really important to get to know yourself, not just on a physical, but on an emotional and a mental level as well.
Yeah. And since we're talking about, love and libido and relationships on this episode, like the way I feel like this really then relates, right? So we're talking about confidence. Some of this then is to have the confidence and the self-awareness to begin to have that conversation, that hard conversation with our partner around whatever. Or maybe it's not hard, but being able to have that more in-depth conversation. Because when it comes to intimacy and love and connection, right? When we're talking about libido and intimacy, one of the things I often find is that people are having the wrong kind of sex, meaning like people are, due to the society and the input and the things that we've been learning through TV, through movies, through media, etc. It's like we begin to think like this is how we have sex, is how we are intimately relating. And by sex, I don't just mean, I don't mean intercourse. I mean everything from flirtation onward, right? So it's like we think about like this is how it's supposed to look because this is what we've seen inundated, but then that's not actually what is like causing our pleasure body, causing our turn on, causing us to feel more connected and alive to ourselves and to our partner. That way is not our way. And so part of that, like developing of that confidence, is also really developing the ability and that inner knowing, like practicing knowing one's own body so much around like, oh yeah, this is the way I'm soothed, or this is the way I feel cared for, or this is the way I like to be touched, or this is what pleasure feels like to me. And the more we can actually learn our own bodies and realize like, actually, I don't really like when you do that thing. Actually, I don't really like, or actually you should do more of that. And the more we can start to understand our own selves, and we can relate to our own selves better, that's when we can then in turn begin to have the right kind of sex, the right kind of intimacy, the right kind of it. And by right, I just mean what is right for you. Because so much of that is like not having that awareness of like, oh, it doesn't have to look this way, or not having that awareness of we can actually talk about that. But the first step with that is really beginning to have that conversation and the confidence to have that conversation with ourselves to say, what do I like? What are my preferences? What are my like absolutely no's, absolutely yeses, and learning that about ourselves and really being honest with ourselves that way, so that then from that place we can begin to have those conversations. Because the other thing I think that happens so much in society is this almost like belief that that like a partner should just have to know, and if a partner doesn't just like know exactly what we want and need, then they don't love us and they don't care for us, when that's not really true. It's like so much of us, so much of the information, like I'm saying, has been like based upon what we're getting from society around what should be and what should be normal, that oftentimes people and partners don't know that we're not, say, enjoying something and something's not pleasurable unless we actually take that time to tell them. And what I tend to find is when people, talk to their partners about this, most of the time partners are really excited because we want to provide love, we want to provide pleasure, we want to provide closeness and intimacy, but we really need to teach each other how, because it's not going to come from the movies, it's not going to come from the media. That's not, that's not real to human life.
It's not going to come from the book The Joy of Sex.
Right.
But it is that conversation, it's that communication, isn't it? Communication within ourselves and communication with each other. If you don't, and it could be that if it's a woman sort of with a male, and he's thinking, okay, this is what she likes, but she hasn't actually said anything to me, and he's not a mind reader, you're not a mind reader. We're not mind readers. We can try and think we are. We can try and think we know what people are thinking, but we're not. And we could find that we're doing something because we think it makes the other person happy, and it doesn't, but they're doing it because they think it makes us happy. And that's not going to help the relationship and the closeness and the intimacy, is it?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, you hit the nail right on the head with that. That's like the vicious cycle I think we can get into with relationships, where when we're not talking about this, like the cycle is like, okay, partner A says or does something to partner B because they think they're providing something of value. Partner B doesn't want to hurt partner A's feelings, so they confirm that it's valuable. Partner A then continues to give more of that sort of thing. And we can talk about emotional or physical or sexual, whatever it is. But then we get into that loop, and then all of a sudden partner B, who's not speaking out, is all of a sudden like, gosh, this person is just like never showing me, love or passion or those sorts of things. Like, the love language book, I think by Gary Chapman, that goes over some of this around how we all have different styles of love. I also, in my work, I talk about the sex languages, and there's 5 different sex languages that I've identified based upon, observation of people and couples over time. And oftentimes it's like, just like the love languages, right? Just like, Gary amazingly pointed out in his book, it's very similar around like, we all express physically, emotionally in different ways, right? We all need different things. And so oftentimes if we're coming and I show up with my language and somebody else shows up with their language, and we come and we meet each other, then nobody is actually getting fulfilled. But we also think like, well, I'm providing them what I like, so like surely they got to like feel good and feel up and feel loved. And so, I think this conversation, it's like scary for people to have, right? It's scary to talk to partners about this, because oftentimes, especially when it comes to sexuality, there is so much of like ego protection involved, right? We want to, it's like an innate, I think, human desire for so many people, especially partnered. So many people have a natural desire to be like, I provide this for my partner, and my partner experiences pleasure and joy. And that in turn makes me feel satisfied that I've been able to provide this, right? That's a very common mental type of scenario I hear from a lot of people and have witnessed in my own relationships. And so it becomes very careful, and we have to be very careful and cautious, because something that oftentimes happens then is like, okay, well, we don't want to say something. If we say something that is wrong, that could say offend that other person or crush that other person and make them feel like, oh my gosh, like I can't provide this, then like so many times then couples go back into the bedroom, for example, and now there's like some level of like performance anxiety and these types of things, because now we feel like we're not providing it. So there's like steps by steps that I take people through on how to have these kind of conversations and these kind of difficult conversations. And the first few steps, really, the first one I've already like shared, it really is, before having these conversations, get really clear on yourself. Like, don't go into these conversations with like, something's not totally right, but I don't really know what it is. That doesn't really help. Like, we want to be very, very clear on like, this is what I like, this is what I don't, this is my preference, this is my need, this I like sometimes. So the more we can have some level of clarity, doesn't mean you have to understand everything. A lot of this is also experienced through, through learning and through exploring, but at least some level of like very, very specific. The more specific we can be, the better. And then a couple other intro steps with this I recommend for people is, one, unless it's like purely all good, don't have the conversation in the bedroom, because we want to make sure that the bedroom, which is probably the space where you connect the most, is this sacred space. We want to make sure that that still has like that energy of safety, right? So if we have something, if we actually like have a conversation in the bedroom and it doesn't go well, then the next time you end up in the bedroom, that might trigger the brain to remember the last time. That can lead to that performance anxiety. So we really want to separate that as much as possible. And then the other thing is making sure that we are always focused on like the positives and adding on to that. I'm not saying that we can't say that, hey, this other thing I don't like as much, but I wouldn't start with that. I would really start with more like, hey, I really love our passion. I really love connecting. I really love when you do insert anything here. And I'm wondering if like we can also add this, or we can change this slightly. What I'm really interested in is connecting with you even deeper and exploring. And I'm really wanting to build onto this foundation, but take it even deeper. So that's a very different frame. And it's like we want to make sure that when we're having these conversations, we're almost like putting people back on the same team. So like, I want to go deeper. Do you want to go deeper with me? Can we have a conversation about how to go deeper? Because when we come at it from like being on that same team, it's almost like it's a very, very different energy than like, okay, you got to improve this. You're doing this wrong. I'm being let down. It's, hey, we're meeting the same goal, it's almost like buying a house together, something like that. Like, what is our goal? What is our common goal? How are we going to manipulate our behavior? How are we going to manipulate what we do so that we're meeting our common goal? So when we're on that same team and focusing on, adding to and making it better as a fundamental foundational frame, even if that means there's certain things that maybe, you don't do anymore. But when we're adding on to that, it really sets this foundation of safety. And it really helps to protect people's egos to not feel like they're doing something wrong and they're letting you down. And that can really protect against that performance anxiety.
Oh, and at the end of the day, nobody's doing anything wrong. It's just not that it doesn't work for you. But they've been with somebody else in the past where it really did work for them. Who knows? But I think it's also, sort of thinking about the fact that we come from different experiences. Sort of our families could be really different in the way they speak, the way words can mean different things to different people, although they should have exactly the same meaning for everybody. And so it's making sure that you are on the same page with the words that you use. because otherwise the conversation can go dreadfully awry, where you've known exactly what you meant, but sadly the other individual didn't understand what you meant in the way you meant it. So it's about being able to have a conversation and saying, and that's what I've always said it from the point of view of, if somebody says something and you're thinking, oh, didn't like that, did you mean what I heard, not what you said? And then rephrase it so that you're not actually creating sort of necessarily any animosity, hurt, whatever, so that you're getting a clarity on what is being said.
Yeah, it's so well said. It's like, one, I think we have different meanings for different words, and two, words have associations with things from our past. So that concept of like trigger, right? So a lot of like teachings around growth and personal development will use the word trigger. And trigger, if you guys don't know that word, oftentimes is like, hey, this thing, sometimes that thing being a word that is actually subconsciously oftentimes reminding me of a past experience where I was hurt, I was betrayed, or whatever it is. And then because it's similar, because there's some level of similarity on a subconscious level, in the current scenario, we respond with our protective heart and our protective self, right? Almost like that past thing was happening. And this, I think, like the older we get, the more experience we have in life, the more, say, hurts we've had, the more potential things can trigger us. So I think, what you're suggesting there and like reminding everybody is just so important, because if we do have those moments where things are like, oh, this is not going well, this person is not getting this, and we're fighting, oftentimes it's that the meaning, like you're saying, of how one person is interpreting things is different than the other. So those clarifying questions are just essential. They're just like truly relationship savers.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe where the time's gone.
So fast.
and everything has been so quiet as well. But obviously you're saying exactly the right thing, which is brilliant. Bearing in mind that we are coming to a close, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you feel you would really like to add in at this point, at this time?
Well, I just want to make sure, like, from a standpoint of libido, of intimacy, of relations, of love, I really look at this, and what I've seen is that there's more, if something's not like flowing and in balance, there's way more than one root cause. So as a libido doc, very, very frequently when I say that to, a random person in the world, the response to somebody gives me is like, oh, so you do hormones. Well, yes, I talk about hormones in my work, and hormones are essential, but it's also very common. And I was actually talking to a lot of my colleagues who truly specialize in just hormones over the weekend, and they were saying it's very, very common that people will get put on hormones, and all of a sudden it's like, well, my libido's not back, right? And that's because hormones are absolutely important. They can change people's lives, balancing hormones. So I'm, huge proponent of adrenals, thyroid, sex hormones. We want to get these things balanced. And when it comes to libido, it can be a wide variety of things. So we can have physical root causes, mental root causes, emotional, interrelational, spiritual root causes. And that's why I look at it as like the low libido is truly a symptom of a lot of these other things often going on. And that's why, you guys, I have a free quiz on my website. It's the Libido quiz. If you go to libidoquiz.com, the purpose of that quiz, I had a programmer help me develop this very, very intricate quiz. You'll see it's quite informative. And the purpose of this is, depending upon how you answer these questions, it will start to give you insight as to maybe some of the top root causes that are maybe the first things to look at. And then, of course, always remembering that, the onion type example that a lot of people in health use around, like, there's usually layers, and we want to make sure we're balancing the physical and the blood flow and the nervous system and the hormonal system and the stress, but we also want to make sure that we have the confidence, that we are working on our body image. We're working on knowing ourselves better. We're working on the right types of sex, that positive communication. So if you try one of these things, I guess my final concluding message is, if you try one of these things and it's like, okay, that did not fix everything, that's to be expected. There's more than one root cause. So make sure you're looking at this like anything else in health, just really holistically and in totality.
Oh, no, brilliant. I've just put the link to your website up in the chat and the link to your podcast. And if there's folks that are watching this on YouTube, then I will have those also underneath the video in the information. So do check that out. Dr. Diane, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been a real pleasure. You absolutely know your topic.
Thank you so much, Sara Jane. It's wonderful to be here. I really appreciate you.
But you can also see your passion for wanting to help people with this. So, and that's what it's always for me so important that, you know, you are as connected to this as you can be. So thank you for your caring. It's so important, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you so much. Just very quickly, folks, next week we've got a today's conversation, and that's going to be, are you hiding from your own voice? And I think that's something maybe we ought to be listening to in many areas of our lives. So I hope you'll join us for that. Dr. Diane, thank you so much. Folks, take care. I hope you'll join us again, and you'll check out more from Dr. Diane. Love, peace, and light to you all. Namaste. Bye.